Among mountains of trash and the acidic stench of abandonment, a grey-haired man struggled to rise, his knees sinking into the mud, mixed with remnants of what the world discarded. The wind cut across his face, carrying the distant sound of engines. He didn't scream, only whispered with a voice almost extinguished, "Don't leave me in the garbage." It was there, in that impossible setting to reconcile with the brilliance of his former life, that destiny placed him before the truth. The man who was once a symbol of power, father of an admired millionaire, now begged for dignity, and the plea was not for pity, but for humanity. The sound of an engine approached. A black SUV appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust in the past. The door opened violently. His son stepped out, his suit stained with dirt, his eyes ablaze, and what he did next changed everything. Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The sky still held shades of blue when Anthony Miller finished signing the last documents of the day. His wrinkled fingers, marked by 72 years of life, held the pen with the same firmness as decades ago. He took a deep breath, adjusting his glasses on his face. Through the wide office window, he observed the garden of the mansion where he lived with his son Richard and his daughter-in-law Camilla. The impeccable green of the trimmed bushes and the gleaming marble fountain reflected the opulence his son had achieved, or rather, that they had achieved together. Anthony closed the leather folder and placed it on the mahogany desk. It was an antique piece, one of the few objects Camilla had allowed to remain in the modernized decor of the house. Family heirlooms clash with the minimalist concept, she would say, with that calculated smile Anthony never quite knew how to interpret. He stood up and felt a twinge in his back, a reminder of a life of work that had started too early. The wall clock read 6:40 in the afternoon. Richard would arrive soon for dinner, at least that's what Camilla's meticulously organized schedule dictated. A dinner, Anthony thought, that would be like all the others in recent months. Silent, formal, with superficial conversations and that tension in the air no one dared to name. "Your tea, Mr. Miller." Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over 20 years, entered the office carrying a silver tray. "Thank you, Cedar." Anthony smiled, a tired but sincere smile. "Sit with me for a bit. This house is too quiet." Mrs. Collins hesitated, looking at the door, as if fearing to be caught red-handed. "Mrs. Miller doesn't like it when I linger in conversation during service." Anthony waved his hand dismissively. "This is still my house, Cider, and talking isn't a crime. At least it wasn't the last time I checked." The woman smiled, adjusting her immaculate white apron, and sat on the edge of the leather armchair. "How are you feeling today, sir? Like a useless old man whose opinions no longer matter?" Anthony took a sip of tea and felt the warmth go down his throat. "But don't worry, I've gotten used to it." Mrs. Collins lowered her gaze. She knew that story. She saw daily how Anthony's space in the house had been reduced, how his ideas were dismissed in family meetings, how his son distanced himself with each new contract signed. "Mr. Miller is different," she ventured, her voice low as if the walls could hear. Ever since Camilla decided the company needed a complete overhaul." Anthony finished, placing the cup on the table. "An overhaul that coincidentally means getting rid of the stubborn old man who insists on talking about business ethics." The sound of a car parking interrupted the conversation. Mrs. Collins rose with a start, smoothing her apron. "That must be Mr. Miller arriving. I'll check if dinner is ready." Anthony nodded and was alone again. He walked to the window and watched his son get out of the black Porsche. Richard, at 42, was the image of success. Tall, elegant, meticulously cut hair, tailored Italian suit. The construction company Anthony had founded decades earlier with a single truck and much sweat was now an empire, and that should have been a source of pride. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Dinner was served promptly at 8, as always. The 12-seat dining table, lit by a crystal chandelier, seemed absurdly large for just 3 people. Camilla, in her form-fitting black dress and discreet but extremely expensive jewelry, sat to Richard's right. Her perfectly straightened blonde hair framed a face of sharp, calculated beauty. "How was your day?" Richard asked his father, out of pure formality. "The usual," Anthony replied as he cut a piece of steak. "Read some old contracts, organize documents." "You shouldn't worry about that, Dad. You're retired now. You should enjoy yourself." "Retired doesn't mean dead, Richard." Anthony held his son's gaze. "I can still contribute." Camilla offered a polite smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Your father is right. Dear, but I think he could make better use of his free time. Perhaps a trip, a senior living spa." Anthony felt his stomach churn. The way she said senior citizens sounded like a veiled insult. "I don't need a spa or trips, Camilla. I just need my son to listen to me when I say there's something wrong with the New Dawn Foundation's contracts." Silence fell heavy over the table. Richard put down his silverware and took a deep breath. Camilla maintained her smile, but her eyes darkened. "Dad, we've talked about this. The foundation is perfect. It's been audited 3 times this year. By auditors chosen by you two." Anthony counted, feeling his heart race. "The numbers don't add up, son. Money is going out without explanation. Families who should be benefiting aren't. And just yesterday, the mayor called asking about a donation that never reached the city hall." "The mayor called you?" Camilla interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. "Why would he do that if you're no longer on the board?" "Because he's known me for 30 years, Camilla. Because he trusts me. Because he knows I wouldn't lie about donations." Richard ran a hand over his face. A gesture of weariness Anthony knew well. "There must be some misunderstanding, Dad. I'll talk to the finance department tomorrow. But for now, can we have dinner in peace?" Anthony wanted to say more. He wanted to show his son the papers he had found, the suspicious transfers, the names of shell companies that appeared in the reports. But Camilla's icy gaze stopped him. There was something in those blue eyes that frightened him more than he cared to admit. The rest of the dinner passed with superficial conversations about the weather, about the new gym opening in the gated community, about the charity dinner happening next weekend. Anthony barely touched his dessert, a caramel pudding that in other times would have been his favorite. When he retired to his room, he carried a weight in his chest. The spacious and comfortable room was a kind of gilded exile. There, among books and mementos, Anthony allowed himself to be who he was, a simple man who had built an empire with honesty and sweat. He sat in the armchair near the window and opened the nightstand drawer. From it he pulled out a worn green folder, frayed by time and frequent handling in recent days. Inside the folder were documents he shouldn't have, papers Camilla would swear had been destroyed. Proof that the New Dawn Foundation, created to help underprivileged families and named after Richard's deceased mother, was nothing more than a front for embezzlement. Anthony's heart ached. How could he tell his son that the woman he loved was stealing not only money, but the meaning of his mother's name? How could he prove it without destroying the family he still had left? He put the documents away again and tried to sleep. Sleep, however, was slow to come, and when it finally did, it brought nightmares of betrayal and abandonment. The next morning, Anthony woke to the sound of raised voices coming from downstairs. He dressed quickly and went down the stairs, leaning on the banister. In the living room, Richard and Camilla were arguing. His son, still in his pajamas, held crumpled papers. Camilla, already impeccably dressed and made up, stood with her arms crossed and an expression of contempt. "What's going on?" Anthony asked. Entering the room, Richard turned to his father, his face pale. The mayor sent copies of the receipts. The donation was never recorded, Dad. You were right. Camilla rolled her eyes. It must be an accounting error. There's no reason for so much drama. It wasn't the only case, Camilla. Richard confronted his wife. I called 3 other donation recipients. None received the full amount, only symbolic values for the records. Anthony felt a mix of relief and sadness, relief that his son finally saw the truth, sadness for the pain it would cause. I tried to warn you, son. For months I've been noticing. Of course you noticed, Camilla interrupted, her voice laced with venom. You live meddling in our business. Trying to regain control, you lost when your son finally took over the company. It's not about control, Camilla. Anthony kept his voice calm, despite the anger growing inside him. It's about doing the right thing, about honoring commitments, about not tarnishing the name of the family and the company I built. A company you built with outdated methods, she retorted. Richard doubled profits in 2 years after he took command and moved away from your antiquated policies. Richard seemed stunned between the two. Where is the money, Camilla? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. A tense silence filled the room. Camilla uncrossed her arms and adjusted her hair, buying time. It's invested, Richard, in more profitable projects than feeding poor people who will never escape poverty. We're multiplying that money so we can make bigger donations later. Without my authorization, without consulting me, because you still listen to your father. She spat the words, pointing at Anthony. Because you still have this obsession with doing the right thing, when we could be growing so much more. Richard ran a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. Anthony knew that look. It was the same one his son had when, as a child, he was caught in some mischief and didn't know whether to confess or lie. We need to fix this, Camilla, immediately. And we will. She approached, softening her voice, touching her husband's arm. But we need to talk in private. Your father is already too agitated by all this. It's not good for his health. Anthony felt his blood boil. Don't use my health as an excuse, Camilla. I'm not a senile old man who needs to be spared the truth. Dad, please, Richard intervened. Camilla is right about one thing. We need to discuss this calmly. I'll get dressed and we'll go to the office to check everything personally. Anthony wanted to protest, but his son's determined gaze stopped him. Perhaps Richard was finally taking charge of the situation. Perhaps there was still hope. All right, but I want to be informed of everything afterward. Richard nodded and went upstairs. Camilla remained behind, staring at Anthony with a look he would never forget, a mix of hatred and determination that made his stomach clench. You might have won this battle, old man, she whispered when Richard could no longer hear, but you don't know what I'm capable of to protect what I've built. Anthony held her gaze. And you don't know what I'm capable of to protect my son and our family's legacy. The following days brought an apparent calm. Richard spent long hours in his office, reviewing documents and making calls. Camilla remained strangely solicitous, asking Anthony about his health, bringing teas and medicines he hadn't asked for. The old man noticed the charade but decided to play along. He kept the damaging documents hidden and waited, patient as only those who have lived long know how to be. On a Thursday afternoon, as the sun began to lazily descend on the horizon, Camilla entered Anthony's office without knocking. She wore an elegant grey ensemble and carried a leather folder. We need to talk, Anthony. She sat down uninvited, crossing her long legs. About your future. My future. Anthony raised his eyebrows. At 72, my future is quite limited, don't you think? She didn't smile. I'm talking about where you'll be living from now on. The man closed the book he was reading and stared at his daughter-in-law. What are you talking about? Richard and I have talked a lot these past few days. She opened the folder and took out some papers. We've concluded that you need special care, a peaceful place, with medical assistance, away from the stress of business. A nursing home. Anthony felt his throat dry. You want to send me to a nursing home? We prefer to call it a senior living community. She slid a brochure across the table. It's a wonderful place, with gardens, recreational activities. You'll love it. Anthony picked up the brochure and examined it in silence. The photographs showed a truly beautiful place, with ample green spaces and modern facilities. But it wasn't about quality. It was about being put away, removed like an obstacle. Did Richard agree to this? It was his idea. Camilla lied with the naturalness of someone saying good morning. He's worried about you, the forgetfulness, the confusion with the Foundation's documents. What confusion? I was right about everything. No, Anthony. She shook her head with false compassion. You mixed up old documents with new ones. The auditors confirmed everything is in order. Richard is devastated that you don't trust him. Anthony felt his heart clench. Could it be possible? Had he really confused the dates, the documents? No, impossible. He might be aging, but his mind was still sharp. I want to talk to my son. He's in New York City finalizing a deal. He'll be back tomorrow night. Camilla stood up. But everything is arranged. You're going to the senior living community next week. We've already hired nurses to help with the transition. Anthony also stood, feeling his legs weaken. I'm not going anywhere without talking to Richard first. Camilla shrugged, heading for the door. As you wish. But he's already signed the authorization. She stopped at the threshold and turned. Oh, and those documents you hid in your drawer. They're gone. Too bad your memory is failing you, isn't it? When she left, Anthony rushed to the nightstand. He opened the drawer with trembling hands. The green folder wasn't there. In its place, a bottle of dementia medication with his name on the label. A medicine he had never seen before. The room began to spin. He sat on the bed, trying to breathe. He needed to think. He needed help. But who would believe him against the word of his son and daughter-in-law, the successful business owners, while he was just a supposedly confused old man? Mrs. Collins. She would know the truth. She had seen the documents, heard his concerns. Anthony got up and went to the kitchen, but found only an unfamiliar woman dressed in the company uniform. "Where's Mrs. Collins?" he asked, trying to control the tremor in his voice. "Mrs. Miller dismissed her this morning." The woman replied without looking up from the vegetable she was cutting. "I'm the new cook, Martha." Anthony felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Cider, his only ally, had been removed. He was alone, completely alone. He returned to his room and closed the door. He needed to think of something, anything. He tried to call Richard's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Had Camilla lied? Was he really in New York City? Anthony no longer knew what was true and what was manipulation. The night fell slow and suffocating. Anthony didn't go down for dinner, despite repeated calls from the new maid. Sitting by the window, he watched the city lights in the distance and tried to organize his thoughts. He didn't realize when he fell asleep in the armchair, exhausted by stress and age. He woke with a start to knocks on the door. The clock read 11:47 p.m. "Mr. Miller?" a male voice called. "I need you to come with me." Anthony opened the door. Two men in dark suits stood in the hallway. One of them held a medical bag. "Who are you?" "We're from the medical transport team, sir. Mrs. Miller hired us to take you to the new senior living community tonight." "Tonight?" Anthony took a step back. "But she said it would be next week." There was a change of plans. The man with the medical bag smiled emotionlessly. "A vacancy came up today, and it's best we take advantage. You don't even need to pack. We've already taken care of everything." Anthony felt the danger like a cornered animal. This wasn't a transfer to a senior living community, it was a removal. Camilla wanted him gone before Richard returned. "I'm not going anywhere." He tried to close the door, but the taller man blocked it with his foot. "Mr. Miller, we have orders to take you, by hook or by crook." "You can't force me. This is kidnapping." "Actually, we can." The man with the medical bag pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Your daughter-in-law has a doctor's order stating you're not fit to make decisions. Technically, she's your legal guardian now." Anthony felt his blood run cold. It was a perfect trap. If he resisted, he would appear senile and aggressive, proving Camilla's point. "Can I at least call my son?" "Sure." The taller man pulled a cell phone from his pocket. "Use mine." Anthony dialed the number he knew by heart. It went to voicemail again. "Let's go, Mr. Miller." The man with the medical bag opened it and pulled out a syringe. To make the trip more comfortable, Anthony backed away until he hit the wall. There was no escape. He thought of screaming, fighting, begging, but something within him refused to yield. "Where are you really taking me?" The men exchanged glances. "To the senior living community, of course." "Don't lie to me." Anthony felt dignity rise within him like a final barrier. "I have the right to know where you're taking me." The man with the syringe hesitated for a moment. "Look, old man, we just get paid to do the job. Your daughter-in-law decides the destination." At that moment, Anthony knew he would never reach any senior living community. Camilla wanted him out of the way, silenced forever. He thought of fleeing, fighting, begging, but something deep inside him refused to bow. "If that's the case, let's go." He raised his head, his eyes moist but determined. "But know that you are helping to destroy a family." The taller man shrugged. "It's just a job, old man." Anthony was led by the arm downstairs. The house was silent and dark. In the entrance hall, Camilla waited, dressed in black, like a premature widow. "Have a good trip, Anthony." She smiled, cold as a statue. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of everything here." "Why, Camilla?" he asked, searching for a last thread of humanity in that woman. "What did I do to deserve this?" "You existed," she replied simply. "You existed and didn't know when to stop existing." The answer, in its crystalline cruelty, hit Anthony like a punch. He looked around at the house he had built, at the walls that had witnessed so many happy moments with his son, with his deceased wife. This would be his last look at the home he loved so much. "My son will find out," he said finally, as he was led outside. "Richard will know what you did." "Richard believes what I want him to believe," Camilla replied, closing the door behind them. "Goodbye, Anthony." The black car waited at the mansion's entrance, engine running, lights off. Anthony was placed in the back seat. The man with the syringe sat beside him, while the other took the wheel. "It won't hurt," the man said, preparing the injection. "It's just to help you sleep a little." Anthony didn't resist. There was no longer any reason. He felt the needle penetrate his arm, and within minutes the world began to blur. His last conscious memory was of the car leaving the mansion gates and disappearing into the night. When he woke, the sun was high and the heat was suffocating. The smell was the first thing that hit his senses, a putrid odor, a mixture of decomposing garbage, smoke, and despair. He tried to move, but his body felt like it weighed tons. He was lying on something wet and soft. When he finally managed to open his eyes completely, the sight left him paralyzed. He was in a landfill, a vast area covered with mountains of waste, where trucks continuously dumped more refuse. In the distance, people in ragged clothes sifted through the garbage, collecting recyclables. The merciless sun beat down on everything, creating a haze of heat and putrefaction. Anthony tried to get up, but his legs gave out. How long had he been unconscious? Hours? A whole day? His lips were parched, his throat burned with thirst. The men had left him there like another discarded object, useless, forgotten. The irony was not lost on him. He, who had built an empire from nothing, would now end his days among the trash and oblivion. A solitary tear ran down his wrinkled face. Not far away, a thin man with a wheelbarrow observed him. Anthony tried to call out, to ask for help, but his voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The man, however, approached cautiously. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked, keeping a safe distance. "Do you need help? Please." Anthony managed to say, "Water." The man, wearing rags that were once clothes, pulled a dented plastic bottle from his pocket and offered it. "It's not very clean, but it's what I have." Anthony drank greedily, not caring. The warm water had a strange taste, but it quenched the fire in his throat. "Thank you," he said, returning the bottle. I need to call my son." The man examined him from head to toe. Anthony was wearing silk pajamas, now dirty and torn, and mismatched slippers. "You're not from around here." It wasn't a question. "How did you end up at the landfill?" Anthony hesitated. How to explain? How to ask for help without sounding crazy? "My daughter-in-law. She had them bring me here, to get rid of me." The man nodded slowly, as if that wasn't the strangest thing he had ever heard. "Do you have a rich family?" "Yes, my son. He needs to know where I am." "There's a payphone at the landfill entrance." The man pointed in an undefined direction. "But it's far. Can you walk?" Anthony tried to get up again, leaning on a nearby piece of wood. His legs trembled but supported his weight. "I think so." He took a wobbly step. "Help me, please. I can pay you when my son comes for me." The man smiled, revealing missing teeth. "My name is Samuel. Come, I'll help you." With slow and painful steps, Anthony walked, leaning on Samuel. The sun beat down mercilessly. The nauseating smell enveloped everything. People watched them with curiosity from a distance. Some whispered, others merely pointed. "Who's the old man in pajamas? Looks like rich folk. Is he crazy? Must have been abandoned." The comments reached his ears like blades. Abandoned. The word echoed in his mind. How could his own son have allowed this? How could Richard not have noticed Camilla's intentions? After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small guard shack at the landfill entrance. A payphone, miraculously intact, was installed on the outer wall. "You need coins," Samuel said, searching his ragged pockets. "I have a few here." Anthony accepted the coins with trembling hands. He dialed the mansion's number, but no one answered. He tried Richard's cell phone again. Nothing. Finally, he remembered Mrs. Collins's number. She answered on the third ring. "Hello? Cedar." Anthony's voice failed. "It's Anthony. Help me, please." A moment of silence. "Mr. Miller? My goodness, where are you? Camilla said they took you to a senior living community, but I didn't believe her. She fired me yesterday. I'm in a landfill, Cider." Tears now flowed freely. "They left me here to die." "My God!" The woman's voice was filled with horror. "Mr. Miller is coming back from New York City today. I'll call him right now." "He's not answering. I already tried." "I'll call his driver then. Joseph always answers." "Which landfill, Mr. Miller?" Anthony looked at Samuel. "What place is this?" "Silver Creek Landfill," the man replied. "On the south side." Anthony repeated the information to Cider. "Stay where you are, Mr. Miller. I'll get help, and please be careful for goodness sake." The call ended, and Anthony found himself alone with Samuel again. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. Soon it would be night. "Come with me," Samuel said. "I know a place where you can wait." Anthony followed him to an area where several improvised tents formed a small community. People cooked over campfires. Children played among piles of separated garbage. The poverty was absolute, but there was an impressive dignity in their organization. Samuel led him to a larger tent, made of blue tarp. "This is the community center," he explained. "The social worker comes here once a week. There's clean water and a bench to sit on." Anthony entered and was met by curious but not hostile glances. An elderly woman offered him a cup of filtered water, which he accepted gratefully. "What happened to you, sir?" she asked, noticing his clothes. "I was betrayed," Anthony replied simply, "by the person my son trusted most." The woman nodded, as if she understood perfectly. "Everyone here has a story of betrayal to tell." She smiled sadly. "Welcome to the end of the line. End of the line." The words echoed in Anthony's mind. Was this how everything would end? He, who had built so much, would die abandoned in a landfill. The hours dragged on. Anthony received a bowl of thin soup and more water. Exhaustion was overcoming him when a commotion started outside the tent. "There's a luxury car at the landfill entrance," someone shouted. "Looks like they're looking for someone." Anthony rose with a start. Could it be Richard? Or were Camilla's men returning to finish the job? Samuel rushed into the tent. "Is it your son? Do you have a son in a suit who drives a big black car?" Anthony's heart pounded. "It's him! It's Richard!" Samuel helped him up, and together they walked as fast as they could toward the landfill entrance. The pain in Anthony's legs was unbearable, but hope gave him strength. In the distance, he saw a black SUV parked. A tall figure was walking among the piles of trash, asking, showing something that looked like a photo. It was Richard. Anthony tried to run but stumbled and fell. The fall was painful, and when he tried to get up, he realized he had cut his knee on a rusty can. Blood stained his already filthy pajamas. "Richard," he shouted with all the strength he had left. "I'm here, son!" Richard turned in the direction of the voice. For an instant he froze. Then he began to run toward his father, stumbling over debris, his immaculate suit now covered in dust and mud. When he reached Anthony, Richard fell to his knees beside him. His face was transfigured by horror and guilt. "Dad! My God, Dad!" He took Anthony's hands in his. "What did they do to you?" Anthony felt tears well up again. "Your wife, son. It was Camilla. She had them bring me here, to die." Richard shook his head, as if he could deny the truth. "No, she wouldn't do that. She said you went to a senior living community, that everything was arranged." "She lied, Richard, just as she's lied about everything." Anthony held his son's face. "The documents I found were true. She's embezzling money from the foundation, and when I found out, she decided to get rid of me." Richard's face contorted into a mask of pain and fury. "Mrs. Collins called me, said you had been taken against your will. I didn't want to believe it, but something inside me knew." He helped his father up. "Let's go home, Dad. We'll fix this." "No, son." Anthony grabbed Richard's arm with surprising strength. "I can't go back to that house while she's there. She'll try again, and next time we might not be so lucky." Richard nodded, his gaze hardening. "Then I'll fix this right now." He helped Anthony into the car, quickly thanked Samuel, promising to return to help, and took the wheel. The car left the landfill, kicking up dust, its tires squealing on the asphalt. "I'm taking you to the hospital first," Richard said, his voice tense. "Then I'll settle accounts with Camilla." Anthony looked out the window as the city flashed by. From the depths of the garbage to the speed of the highway, life was indeed unpredictable. At the hospital, the doctors examined him carefully. Dehydration, some cuts and abrasions, but nothing serious. Physically, he would survive. Emotionally, the scar would be permanent. Richard remained by his side the whole time, holding his hand, repeatedly asking for forgiveness. When the doctor finally left them alone, Anthony looked deeply into his son's eyes. "It wasn't your fault. You didn't know. I should have seen it." Richard shook his head, devastated. "I should have believed you from the start." Love is blind, son, and she knew exactly how to manipulate you. Richard took a deep breath, his face a mask of determination. I'm going home now. I need to confront her. Be careful. Anthony squeezed his son's hand. She's dangerous. I know, now I know. Richard left the hospital and drove like a man possessed. The mansion was silent when he arrived. The lights on created shadows in the well-kept gardens. When he entered, he found Camilla in the living room, drinking a glass of red wine. She smiled when she saw him, but the smile died as she noticed his expression. What's wrong, dear? Why are you so dirty? Richard walked toward her slowly. Where's my father, Camilla? She blinked, quickly composing an expression of confusion. At the senior living community, love. I told you yesterday on the phone. Lie. His voice was low, contained. I just found him at Silver Creek landfill, abandoned like a piece of trash. Camilla paled for an instant, but soon regained her composure. What are you talking about? You must be confusing things. Your father is at Serena Heights Senior Living. We can visit him tomorrow. Stop lying, Richard exploded, knocking over the coffee table with a gesture. Mrs. Collins called me. My father told me everything. The men you hired left him to die in the garbage. Camilla recoiled, the mask finally falling. You don't understand. He was destroying us, meddling in everything, threatening our future. What future, Camilla? A future built with money stolen from a foundation named after my mother. She swallowed hard. It was for us, Richard, for our financial security. That money was being wasted. Wasted, he advanced, furious. Wasted helping families who don't have enough to eat, children who don't have school. That's what the foundation was for. Don't be naive, she retorted, her voice now harsh. Those people will never escape poverty. We're just multiplying our capital. Richard stared at her as if seeing a monster. Who are you? I don't even recognize you anymore. I'm the woman who made you who you are today. She raised her chin. Without me, you'd still be following your father's antiquated rules, making half the profit we make now. And killing my own father? Is that also part of your success plan? Camilla shrugged. He found out too much. It was a risk we couldn't take. The coldness with which she spoke left Richard paralyzed. There was no remorse, no guilt, just a cold calculation of profits and losses. It's over, Camilla, he said finally. Tomorrow I'm going to the police and the district attorney's office. I'll hand over all the documents my father found. She laughed, a joyless sound. What documents? I burned everything. My father made copies. Richard lied, watching her face pale. And I sent them to my email before I traveled. Everything is recorded. Camilla staggered as if she had been punched. For an instant, Richard saw fear in her eyes, the first genuine feeling he had seen in her in a long time. You wouldn't do that. You'd destroy yourself along with me. Perhaps, he nodded. But it would be a fair price to pay for almost killing my father, for betraying everyone's trust. Camilla grabbed her purse and walked to the door. This isn't over, Richard. Yes, it is. He didn't move. The police are already on their way. Mrs. Collins helped me file the report, even before I went to the hospital. As if evoked by his words, blue and red lights began to flash at the mansion's entrance. The sound of sirens broke the night's silence. You betrayed me, Camilla whispered, her eyes now full of hatred. No, Camilla, you betrayed everything we were. The door opened, and 2 police officers entered, followed by a detective. Camilla was arrested right there, while uttering threats and accusations. Richard watched everything in silence, an immense void in his chest where love once existed. When she was taken away, he sat on the stairs, looking at the now empty hall. The enormous house felt strange, as if it too had been betrayed. At the hospital, Anthony received the news with contained relief. There was no joy in Camilla's downfall, only the sad realization that greed had destroyed what could have been a happy family. "What do we do now, Dad?" Richard asked, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed. Anthony looked out the window at the illuminated city. "Start over, son, with truth and justice." In the weeks that followed, the storm subsided. Camilla was formally charged with embezzlement, falsifying documents, and attempted murder. The Foundation underwent a complete and external audit. Richard publicly acknowledged the errors and committed to returning every diverted cent. Anthony, now recovered, moved to a smaller, cozier apartment. Richard sold the mansion. There were too many dark memories within those walls. A month after the incident, Anthony received an unexpected visit. Samuel, the man who had helped him at the landfill, was at his door, clean and in new clothes. "Your son offered me a job at the Foundation," he explained, a wide smile on his face. "I'm going to coordinate a recycling and training project for the landfill scavengers." Anthony smiled, deeply moved. "Come in, Samuel. We have a lot to talk about." That afternoon, the two men shared stories, pains, and hopes, two lives that should never have crossed paths, united by destiny in an unexpected way. When Samuel said goodbye, Anthony remained on the porch, watching the sunset. Richard arrived shortly after, carrying briefcases and a tired but serene expression. "How was your day?" Anthony asked. "Difficult, but productive." Richard sat beside his father. "We're reorganizing the entire foundation. New projects, greater transparency. It's like you always said, doing the right thing pays off in the end." Anthony nodded, placing his hand on his son's shoulder. "Do you know what I learned in that landfill, Richard?" "What, Dad?" "That sometimes we need to lose everything to understand what truly matters. Between the luxury that blinds us and the garbage that humbles us, there's a place of dignity, and that's where we should build our lives." Richard hugged his father, his eyes misty. "I almost lost you because of my blindness, but you found yourself because of your courage," Anthony completed. "And that, son, is worth more than any fortune." The sun was setting on the horizon when the father murmured something his son almost didn't hear. "Life always offers a second chance, but not everyone gets out of the car to take it." And the silence that followed was peaceful. Because between luxury and trash, what defines a man isn't what he has, but what he chooses to save. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.